Are you one of those parents that gets a little knot in your stomach at back to school time and maybe you don't even want to send your kids back to school, but you're not sure how to get started with homeschooling? If that's you, stick around. We're going to talk about 5 easy steps to get started homeschooling in Washington State. Hey there, my name's Moggy, and this is Half-Acre Harvest, where I share about learning to homemake, homeschool, and homestead on our half-acre microfarm. So today, we're talking about getting started homeschooling in Washington State. If you don't happen to live in Washington, you can find the requirements for your state at hslda.org. That's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You can also just do a Google search for homeschooling associations in your state. So there's just 5 easy steps to get started homeschooling in Washington. The first step is to become qualified as a homeschooler. Now, this has nothing to do with your ability to homeschool your children or the day-to-day teaching. This is actually just all about what the state wants to see when you begin homeschooling. So to be qualified as a homeschooler in Washington, you can do it in one of 4 ways. Now, you only have to. The first way is to have 45 college credits. So that's 1 year of full-time college at any college. They can be in any discipline. Now, if you don't happen to have those college credits, you can take a parent qualifying course. These are often offered on weekends at community colleges, and there's also a few online options. I'll link to some of those below. The third way you can qualify as a homeschooler in Washington is to hire a certified teacher to oversee your homeschool. Now, in this case, the teacher does not generally do the teaching. Meet with you about an hour a week and look over what your plans are, look at your progress, and make suggestions for things that you might tweak. The last way to qualify as a homeschooler in Washington is to gain the approval of your local superintendent. Now, I don't actually know anyone who's done this, and I have no idea what each superintendent would be looking for, so that's something you're going to go ahead and reach out to your local school to find out. So, once you've established that you're qualified to homeschool in Washington, the next thing you need to do is withdraw your students if they're already enrolled, and then file the Declaration of Intent to provide home-based instruction. In Washington, we call this the D of I, or the Declaration of Intent. You can find a copy of this form at the OSPI website, and you can also often find it at your school website. Now, on this form, it should ask you for your name and address, and it should ask you for the ages and birth dates of your children. There's also a checkbox that you can check if you are planning to use a certified teacher to oversee your homeschool. The last thing you do is sign. If it asks for any other information, you are not required to fill that out. And I do want to clarify that when you state that you're using a teacher, if indeed you are, they don't ask you who the teacher is, and that teacher does not have to be in communication with the school at all. I also want to clarify one more thing about the Declaration of Intent. The Declaration of Intent is just that, a declaration. You are not asking the school for permission to homeschool. That's not something they give. And also, as another point, the school isn't probably the best place to go with your homeschool questions. The local public educator's job is to be a public educator, so they know what is required of public schools. They are not a great source about what is required of homeschoolers. Okay, so we've qualified to homeschool, we've withdrawn and filed our Declaration of Intent, and here is where the fun starts. Now you can begin to teach the 11 required subjects. In Washington State, we do not have any specific guidance as to when we teach each subject, how we teach each subject, or to what extent we teach each subject. That's all left to the parent to decide. So the 11 required subjects in Washington are reading, writing, spelling, language, math, science, social studies, history, health, occupational ed, and an appreciation of art and music. Again, all of that is to be decided by you when you teach that, to what extent. You don't have to teach everything every day. You don't have to teach everything every year. Some classes are for older students and some are for younger students. So you just need to make sure that you keep track of what you're doing and cover those at some point in your homeschooling career. And so the next thing you need to do, we've qualified, we've withdrawn and filed our declaration, we've started to teach. Now, once a year, we're going to be required to do a standardized test or a non-test assessment. And how you can do that is by taking one of the standardized tests that is approved for Washington State. I'll link to a few of those below. And then another way you can do that, if you prefer not to test, or you have a student that isn't a great test taker, is you can have them assessed by a certified teacher. If you're already working with a teacher, I would probably just go with that teacher. There's also organizations where they send you a form to fill out, and you basically just checklist everything that you've covered for the year, and then they send that off to a certified teacher who looks it over and returns a form that says that your progress has been assessed by a teacher. And that is the extent of what is required by the law. Now, when you have the results from these assessments or tests, that's when we get to the next step. The last step is that you keep records. Now, the state law requires that we keep the results from our annual assessments and that we keep vaccination records, or a record that you have not vaccinated your children. Everything else that you want to put in your records is up to you. You don't have to submit these to anyone, and no one's ever going to ask you for them, with a couple small exceptions. If you ever become involved with CPS, they will probably want to see records of what you're doing in your homeschool. And I actually don't know anyone that has happened to, but I have heard horror stories online. So you do want to actually go ahead and keep those records. And then the second time when you might be asked for them is if at some point your child decides to return back to public school. I actually had a daughter that decided to go back in 8th grade, and I just went ahead and sent in the copy of her most recent assessment, but I don't think they even looked at it. They just placed her where they thought she belonged, and she did great. So that's it. There's just those 5 easy steps to get started. Again, it's qualify as a homeschooler, withdraw and file that declaration of intent, begin teaching the 11 subjects, do an annual assessment, and keep records. It is really that simple, and our homeschooling predecessors did a great job of working with the state to get a home-based instruction law that really works well for us and that isn't top-heavy with a lot of state oversight. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll come back and try to offer you links and more direction if you need it. If this video was helpful, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. We'll be talking more about homeschooling, scratch cooking, gardening, and other things that I'm busy with all the time. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time.